Hello guys, and welcome to Heidi's Fish Tank. Today I wanted to take a look at my husband's Nano tank that he normally has set up in his classroom, and talk a little bit about Nano tanks in general and some things to consider before you end up purchasing that, or before you end up purchasing it, setting it up. Do you really want a Nano tank? All those kinds of questions is kind of what we're going to cover in this video. But first I want to say quick thank you to SC Reefer who sent me this tank top. I will link his channel down below. He does all kinds of saltwater videos, and he saw that I was doing the Fish Fan t-shirts, which you can buy yourself. It's linked down below in the Teespring campaign. He was like, would you like a tank? And I was like, yes I would. So thank you for that. But fellow fish fans, here are some things to consider before you purchase a Nano tank. So let's take a look at what we've got going on over here. So this is the 5.5 gallon freshwater Nano tank that usually is in my husband's classroom. My husband is a high school teacher, if you guys don't know, and I will try to find the link and link it down below, or if not, I'll link something very similar because I can't remember where we got this tank. But it's a 5.5 gallon, and then we put a glass lid on the top, and I just changed out that light. And I wanted to talk a little bit about some things that you might want to consider before you pick out a Nano tank, and the pros of a Nano tank, kind of the cons of a Nano tank, and what we have going on in here. Just because I think that a lot of times people who get Nano tanks are often new, and there's some things that they may want to consider before they purchase them. Although I don't necessarily agree with the premise that a larger tank is necessarily easier, but we'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. So the first thing that you guys might notice is the stocking level. So this tank currently has 5 fish in it and 1 snail. There's not a lot of fish, and honestly it could even be considered a little bit overstocked. What we have are 4 neon tetras, which are not enough, and I'll get to that in a minute. And then, oh, my finger's shaking. That one little guy right there is an endler. If I was going to recommend a fish for a 5.5 gallon tank, I would highly recommend getting endlers like that, which we'll talk about in a sec too. This tank used to house 1 pea puffer, which it's a perfect setup for a pea puffer in my opinion. This would also be a really good betta tank setup if you wanted to do a betta, but I wouldn't do tank mates with a betta in this tank. So the first thing that you want to consider is, let's talk about the pros first. One of the biggest pros, and the reason why this tank ended up in my husband's classroom, is simply the fact that it is small. It doesn't need a stand to sit on. It can fit on a desktop, and it doesn't take up a huge amount of space. Being that he was a teacher, he couldn't put up a 55 gallon in his room. You don't have to have a stand for this. One thing to consider with water is that water weighs, once you factor in salt, if you're looking at, you know, a saltwater tank or substrate and everything, you can guess that a fish tank is going to weigh about about 10 pounds per gallon. So we're looking at a little over 50 pounds here. So that's nothing. But say even a 10 gallon tank, that's 100 pounds. And then anything beyond that, we're looking at 200, 300, 550 pounds for a 55 gallon tank. And so a 5.5 gallon, you don't necessarily have to be quite as cautious about where you're setting it down or making sure that the stand that it's on is an aquarium stand. Now this one has been moved into our house, and that's another reason why we went with a 5.5 gallon, because it's something that could easily be switched out and moved from the classroom back to our house to the classroom, because he is a teacher, and over summers, which we just started the first week of summer here, this can't stay in his classroom because there will be no one there to maintain it. I mean, I guess it could, but then he would have to swing by and do water changes, and we'd have to set up an auto feeder and all of those kinds of things. So that's just something to consider. Another thing that Ken was considering when he was trying to decide between this tank and doing something different in it was whether to do freshwater or saltwater. And I have a whole video dedicated to freshwater versus saltwater. I also have a whole playlist devoted to Nano tanks, so I'll try to remember to link both of those in the down bar, in the description and in the iCards. But he ultimately decided to go with fresh water because when it comes to a nano tank, if you're looking at salt water, evaporation is a really, really big concern, and it can be really difficult to keep a saltwater tank topped off and keep the salinity in check when it's just a nano tank. And he wanted to be able to do things like have all these plants in here, which allows him to greatly reduce the maintenance in this tank. This tank, the plants actually look kind of sad. We did some changeovers of the plants, and I'm hoping that over the summer we can get these plants thriving a little bit better. You can see there's kind of like some debris and stuff, although it looks a lot better than my dad's tank at the moment. But because there's all these plants in here, it really keeps the water parameters in check, which helps with the stocking level of these fish. A 5.5 gallon really, really, really limits the type of fish that you can have in there. Those endlers are great in my opinion. A pea puffer is great in my opinion. I don't think that the neon tetras are the best choice for this tank. They do okay. I would prefer to have green neons in there than actual neons. They do okay, but the thing is with most small fish is that they need a school. Most of them use schooling as a way to avoid predators, and so in order to feel safe and secure, they tend to thrive more in a school. So in the case of these neon tetras, we really should have an absolute minimum of 5 in there, which we used to have, and I guess one died, and I didn't know about that until Ken brought the tank home. So I went in and I got another neon tetra, and he's in quarantine right now. He should be added tomorrow, which is Tuesday. I'm recording this on Monday. I don't know when it's going to go live. But so those 5 neon tetras and the 1 endler. Endlers, by the way, they'll shoal, but they do okay with less than a school. So it's a little bit less concerning about the endler, which is why I think endlers are really good. Scarlet Batis is another really good one for these really small tanks. And my favorite are Rasboras. So something like Galaxy Raspora, which is also called a Celestial Pearl Danio. There's a lot of options, but not as many as you're going to have with a bigger tank. And the balance of making sure that this school is large enough for the fish that are in it, while also ensuring that you're not overloading the bioload in the tank, is one of the biggest concerns when you're looking at a small tank. Now, the reason why I was like, okay, let's go ahead and add another neon tetra is because I felt that we did need a larger school in here, and because these plants actually are keeping the water in check really well. One of the things that people will tell you is that you need to do really, really frequent water changes, and so that's going to make it harder. And that is true to some extent. The water parameters can change quite a lot in a small tank like this really quickly, especially when you're looking at saltwater water parameters. But it's really easy to do a water change. So actually my husband's standing right next to me. Ken, how do you do a water change in this tank? What does it involve?
Hello fish friends, fans, persons. It is mostly what I do is I have a cup in my room and I scoop out about 10% of this, maybe more, and I feed my snake plant thing.
Not an actual snake. He has a house plant.
It's called a snake plant.
Yeah.
And then I fill the rest of it up with leftover drinking water from that day because I drink water out of like a purified water gallon thing.
Yeah, so it's super duper easy. It's literally just a scoop out. There's no buckets, there's no siphon involved in the whole thing. And you can see that there is a little bit of debris, and every once in a while I will take old tank water and squeeze out the filter media into old tank water, because all he's running in here is sponges. He doesn't have any kind of carbon or chemical filtration at all, because he doesn't want to take away from the plants. Now, Ken has not been running any kind of fertilizer in this tank even really, which is probably why these plants aren't doing so great. We did have a little bit of root tabs that were in there for a while, but I've been testing the water since we added it back into our house and realized that I think these plants would do better with some fertilizer. The other thing is we went ahead and we changed out the light. So this is a Marineland light. I will link it down below. It actually came with a free tank that I picked up, I think on Craigslist or something like that. But it is quite a large light for such a small system. But our hope is that that will help these plants do a little bit better, and we'll see how they kind of do. Now, The other thing that we're looking at is we've got quite a little bit of debris there, and we're trying to consider what we want that might be able to clean it up. Like I said, this is really, really limited. So while, yes, something like pygmy cories could clean that up, we also obviously don't want to overstock the tank. So another option could be something like shrimp. But I would love to hear from anyone who has kept shrimp with an assassin snail, because somewhere in their hiding we do have an assassin snail, and I'd like to know if the assassin snail has eaten your guys' shrimp. So I'd really, really love to hear about that down below. Overall, yes, you do need to change water more frequently in a nano tank, and water parameters can shift more quickly, but a 10% water change in here is literally a cup of water. A 50% water change in here is, you know, 2.5 gallons. Or well, I guess 2 3/4 gallons, because this is a 5.5 gallon tank. But you can change a lot of water and really make a huge difference on this tank very, very, very quickly. So I do not agree with the premise that a nano tank is necessarily more difficult than a larger tank. The biggest thing is with a larger tank you can be a little bit more lazy, and the biggest pro with a larger tank, and I think why most people ultimately end up upgrading and upgrading and upgrading, is you can obviously have a lot more fish. These fish that are in here are small, and even though they're small, it still could be considered an overstocked tank. It still could be considered an overstocked tank. There will probably be angry people in the comments that will say neon tetras shouldn't even be in a 10 gallon, and I personally am a little bit more liberal with my stocking. You guys might notice that. I don't agree with that at all. They're fine in this tank. They would probably be happier if there were a couple more of them, which is why I have one that's in quarantine right now. But the water parameters are staying in check extremely, extremely well, with just the little water changes that Ken is doing on the tank and what the plants are taking care of. And we did add some more bulbs in there, some more bulb plants in there, so I'm hoping that that will make it grow and do an even better job of helping take care of the nitrates that are in the tank. The biggest thing is test your water. The biggest thing is understanding the nitrogen cycle, which I always forget to mention at the beginning of the video. I think a lot of people who are new to fish start with nano tanks. Make sure that what you are stocking in there is something that can live in there their whole life. This is not a tank for a goldfish. This is a tank for endlers. And like I said, some people will say that the neon tetras are too much. Test your water, check your water. Because a lot of new people get nano tanks, I think it's also really important to know what the nitrogen cycle is. So linked down below is a video called Stop Killing Your Fish. Check it out if you haven't yet. I look forward to updating you guys on this tank. Thumbs up for fish in the classroom and helping students get excited about animals. If you're new around here, consider hitting the subscribe button, and don't forget to check out the Teespring fish fan t-shirts down below. And you can also check out that those videos that are on either side of that subscribe button. I'd love if you did that. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye guys!